The Phillies struggled this week with runners in scoring position, however I don't think that it's a reason to panic. Also, the Sixers' 2022-2023 schedule was released. I'll go through some of the biggest matchups as well as some oddities for this upcoming season. This episode of the Philly Sports Spot YouTube channel starts right now. What's going on, everybody, and welcome into this edition of the Philly Sports Spot YouTube channel. I am your host, Jordan Hirsch. Now, guys, before we get into this video, please make sure you like this video and subscribe to my channel with notifications turned on so you never miss another upload. You could also follow me on Instagram. The link will be in the description below. So let's start out this episode by talking about the Phillies. The Phillies had a pretty bad week this week. They went 2-4. Losing 3 games in all to those hated New York Mets. They took 2 of 3 in Cincinnati. As we take a look at the Phillies' week in review, they started out the week on Saturday losing 1-0. Jacob deGrom was just fantastic in that game. Not too mad about that game. Aaron Nola pretty much matched him pitch for pitch. Just gave up a little single to Pete Alonso in the first inning. And that ended up proving to be the difference there. So the Mets got the win 1-0 Saturday. On Sunday, the Phillies were shut out again as Chris Bassett dominated, and the Mets were able to get a lot of bloop hits off of Zach Wheeler. The Mets win that game 6-0. The Phillies then get back on track in Cincinnati, winning the first game of that series Monday 4-3. And Mundo Sosa came up with some big hits and some big defensive plays. He had 3 RBIs in that game, in fact. The Phillies then found their offense on Tuesday as they won 11-4, mashing 5 home runs, breaking their then 6-game homerless drought. The Phillies were then shut out on Wednesday 1-0. They got walked off on a Barrero RBI single off Sir Anthony Dominguez in the 9th. So the Reds win that game 1-0. It was the 3rd time the Phillies were shut out this week. They were then off Thursday and back at it again yesterday in front of a sold-out crowd at Citizens Bank Park and kind of had a letdown. The Phillies fell behind early. They were down 5-0 in that game after the 5th inning. Schwarber made it 5-2 and made things a little bit interesting, but the Mets ended up pulling this one out 7-2 yesterday. And runners in scoring position has been a problem for this team in the past. It was a problem again this past week. The Phillies went 12 for 53 this week with runners in scoring position. That's good for a 235 average. So you look at that and you say, it's not awful. It's of course not where you want it to be, but 235. I mean, it's not like it's really a major problem. However, on that game Tuesday that I mentioned, they scored 11 runs, won that game 11-4. They went 6 for 15 with runners in scoring position on that day. So if you take that game away, it drops it down to 6 for 38, which is good for just a 158 average. And that, of course, is a problem. It certainly is a little concerning to see the Phillies go back to struggling with runners in scoring position, especially considering that that was one of their big bugaboos for the first couple months of the season when the team was not good. They were playing out not good in the first couple months of the season, and runners in scoring position was a major factor in that. However, I don't think this is a huge reason to worry. We didn't have Kyle Schwarber really at all this week, for the exception of a couple pinch hit appearances, and he played last night and did come up with a big 2 RBI single with runners in scoring position. So I think that kind of shows just how Kyle Schwarber maybe could have affected this a little bit. So no Schwarber, of course no Bryce Harper. I'll get into him a little bit later. But no Schwarber. Brandon Marsh, who hasn't hit that bad since he came over, he was out for a lot of this week after he suffered that injury in Cincinnati. So I think that it's really nothing to concern ourselves with right now. The Phillies struggled with runners in scoring position this week. If it continues, of course, it's going to become a problem, especially with some of the teams the Phillies are about to face coming up, and their teams that the Phillies should handle. So yeah, but I don't think right now we should be too upset with the whole runners in scoring position thing. As I did say, I am going to get into Bryce Harper here. So Bryce was transferred to the 60-day IL, which I think scared everybody when the Phillies made that move on Thursday. However, that was just simply to make room for Bradley Zimmer, who the Phillies claimed off waivers from the Blue Jays to replace Brandon Marsh in the outfield. So, of course, Bradley Zimmer, of course, was not on the 40-man roster, and in order to make a 40-man roster spot available, you have to move a player to the 60-day IL. That's what the Phillies did with Bryce. That is, of course, retroactive to his injury back in June, and he is still able to come off of that 60-day IL next week, when he most likely will be heading on a rehab assignment in Lehigh Valley. It was announced that he should be able to begin his rehab assignment in Lehigh Valley next week, and then we'll hopefully be back in early September, maybe even the end of August. I know Dave Dombrowski said earlier that he did think that a September 1st Bryce Harper return date is, quote, realistic. That, of course, would be a huge boost to this Phillies offense that right now looks like maybe they could use that boost. And of course, Bryce Harper could provide a huge spark as the Phillies make this push for the playoffs. And so, as I mentioned, the Phillies did claim Bradley Zimmer off waivers from Toronto. That was to get a fill roster spot for the Phillies. Put Brandon Marsh on the 10-day IL with a bone bruise in his knee and a sprained ankle after he came down very awkwardly on Tuesday night trying to rob a Jonathan India home run ball in Cincinnati. I think when we all saw this happen, we probably all thought the worst. I thought that he tore his ACL the way he went down writhing in pain on the ground. It was really good to see him be able to get up and walk off under his own power. Phillies announced that there is no structural damage and he will hopefully be able to return in a couple of weeks, which I think is really good news considering, just all things considered, how bad that injury could have been. So the Phillies pick up Bradley Zimmer, who is a excellent defender. He's also one of the fastest players in the league. So the Phillies now all of a sudden have some major speed on this team, as well as some outfield defensive help. Bradley Zimmer is really just a liability on offense. However, he did hit a double down the left field line yesterday, but he's still hitting just over 100 for the season. So hopefully he will only be here for a couple of weeks. He can provide some defense, as he did last night with that diving play out in center to rob Pete Alonso. And hopefully he could kind of contribute to the Phillies in that sense, because we know we're probably not going to get that much from his bat. Alright, so let's take a look now at the Phillies week ahead. They're going to finish off this 4-game series with the Mets today and tomorrow. They have a doubleheader tomorrow. The first game is at 1:05. That can be seen on NBC Sports Philadelphia. The second game, it's a split doubleheader, so it's going to be at 7:15. That game will be on Fox for Baseball Night in America. The Phillies will then wrap up this series tomorrow at 1:35 on NBC Sports Philadelphia. They're going to then take on the Cincinnati Reds again, this time at home in a 4-game set. All games at 7:05 and on NBC Sports Philadelphia Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And then they will welcome another NL Central team, the Pirates, for a weekend series beginning next Friday at 7:05. That game is on NBC 10. And then the next 2 games of that series are both on NBC Sports Philadelphia, Saturday at 6:05 and Sunday at 1:35. And of course, I would be remiss if I did not mention that the Eagles will also play 2 games this week. The first game will be on Sunday at 1 o'clock. They're going to be in Cleveland. That game will be on NBC 10. And then 7 p.m. on Saturday, the 27th, down in Miami, again on NBC 10. Alright, so switching gears now into the Sixers, as their 2022-2023 schedule was released this past Wednesday, and it is a weird one. I think everybody's probably gotten a chance to look at the schedule, so I'm going to break down some of the big games here first, as the Sixers will have the first game of the season in the entire NBA, as they will play up in Boston against the reigning Eastern Conference champs on October 18th. That game will be on TNT at 7:30. It will be one of 2 games on TNT for the first Tuesday night in the NBA. The Sixers will then host the Bucks on that Thursday, October 20th. For their first home game of the season. Should be a loud crowd at the Wells Fargo Center for that game. The NBA did announce that the Sixers are going to play on Christmas this year up at Madison Square Garden in New York. That's presumably going to be the 12 o'clock game, considering the Knicks usually get that 12 o'clock game on the Christmas Day slate. For Rivals Week, which is a new thing that the NBA announced they're going to start this year, where all rivals will play each other for 1 week between January 24th and January 28th. That week, the Sixers are going to host the Brooklyn Nets. That game is going to be on January 25th. And then on January 28th, they're going to host Nikola Jokic and Denver Nuggets in what's become a little bit of a personal rivalry there between Joel Embiid and Nikola Jokic. And of course, the moment we've all been waiting for, hopefully Ben Simmons will potentially, if he doesn't back out, he will return hopefully on November 22nd. That is the Tuesday before Thanksgiving. That game will be on TNT at 7:30. Expect a lot of boos in the city for that game at the Wells Fargo Center. But now let's get into a little bit of the oddities of this schedule. I mean, if you go through the first half compared to the second half, the first half is exceptionally more easy, at least on paper, than the second half is. I mean, if you just look at some of these matchups, I mean, just look at how the Sixers end the second half. They're going to end the second half, so this is after Christmas until the end of the second half. They're going to end at Washington, at New Orleans, at Oklahoma City, home against New Orleans, home against Indiana, home against Chicago, at Detroit, home against Detroit, and then home against Oklahoma City. I mean, you probably should win, if not all those games, maybe you lose one. I think that would be acceptable with the Sixers, and that's just the end of that first half. The rest of the first half schedule is much, much easier than the second half schedule is. I mean, just look at the last month of the Sixers season. Look at how they're going to have to go into the playoffs. I mean, this is their last 12 games of the season. So they're going to play home against Chicago, then at Chicago, at Golden State, at Phoenix, at Denver, home against Dallas, home against Toronto, at Milwaukee, home against Boston, home against Miami, and then at Atlanta and at Brooklyn to end the season. That is going to be an absolute gauntlet heading into the playoffs. It is going to be crucial this season for the Sixers to get out ahead early and kind of set themselves up for that second half because it is going to be very tough. And if they do not set themselves up well for the second half, this team could be in some trouble heading into a potential playoff push. And I mean, some other oddities in this schedule, it's just weird overall. There are a ton of home at homes. I mean, when I was just going through those last games, you saw there was the home at home there at Detroit, then home against Detroit to end the first half, and then they're going to have that home at home with Chicago towards the end of the second half as well. There are a ton of these, and they play back to back. How about this? Games 49 and 50, Monday and Wednesday, January 30th and February 1st. It's a 2-game series at home against Orlando. I thought we were done with those after 2020, 2021. But nope, the Sixers have a 2-game home series against the Magic at the end of January and at the beginning of February. And again, I mean, just look at some of these like road trips and homestands. There are very few times where the Sixers are just going to play one home game and then go back out on the road, or play one road game and come back home. I mean, this schedule is just filled with extended homestands and extended road trips. There's a point in the schedule in January where the Sixers are going to go almost 2 weeks between home games, and then in February they're going to into March they're going to go almost 3 weeks between road games. They have, of course, their 2 West Coast swings, but then there are just some weird ones here. Like here in March, they go at Miami, at Dallas, at Milwaukee, at Indiana, at Minnesota. Like, it's not like that's a West Coast swing or even really a Midwest. I mean, there's Midwest teams in there, but it's not like the NBA ever really does Midwest swings where you just work your way through parts of this country. It's just weird. I mean, here's another one in December: at New York, at Washington, at New Orleans, at Oklahoma City. That is, of course, when Disney on Ice comes to the Wells Fargo Center typically. But again, the Sixers are typically out west when that happens. Instead, they kind of just are just like filling in road games. So it's just weird overall. I don't really like the schedule. It's weird. It's weird. And I think that anybody who looks at this is probably thinking the exact same. And I apologize for using the word weird all the time here. But that's just, I think, the perfect way to describe this schedule. They have a ton more home games in the first half than they do in the second half. So the second half is just going to be so much harder, and it's going to be crucial for the Sixers to set themselves up this season. Alright, so that is going to wrap things up for this edition of the Philly Sports Spot YouTube channel. Again, make sure you guys like this video and subscribe to my channel with notifications turned on, so you never miss another upload. I post every Saturday. You can also follow me on Instagram. The link will be in the description below, or you can just look me up. It's at Philly Sports Spot. That is PhillySportSpot. So just one S between sport and spot. Thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you next week. Have a good week, everybody. Let's go Phillies and let's go Eagles.